You in the operating system course, we are currently discussing the first module. As part of the introduction, we had already covered what an operating system is, what operating systems do, and we also talked very briefly about the organization and architecture of the computer system. Then we talked about how the operating system structure and the operations are closely related to the architecture of the computer system. Right, so from the computer system organization and architecture is from the perspective of the hardware, and if the hardware architecture or the structure is available, how it can be designed with the software support, which is basically available in the operating system. So these are the points we discussed in our previous sessions. In this video, we are going to talk about the operating system functions, in which we'll be covering the process management and memory management in this video, and the rest of the functions will be discussed in the following sessions. So this diagram shows an abstract view of the operating system. So this pyramid shows, in the bottom of the pyramid we have 4 different managers, and the top of the pyramid is the user interface. So the operating system functions as such are divided into 4 different modules. Each module is used for managing one of the resources of the operating system, or let me say the computer system, because we know that to complete a task in a computer we need different resources. Like you need the resource like the input output devices, memory, the processor and the files. These are the different resources generally managed or utilized for completing a task in a computer system. In that case, the operating system functions are divided into 4 different modules. The first module will be used for handling the processor, another module for handling the memory, third module is used for managing the files, and the fourth module is used for managing the input output devices. Now when I say these 4 modules, and each module will be managed by a manager called processor manager, memory manager, file manager, device manager. So I can put it this way, like the processor manager is one module which helps in handling the processor. All the processes that are running in your computer system will be managed by the processor manager, and the memory utilization, how the memory is to be utilized and allocated, will be handled by the memory manager, and how the files in the secondary storage device are to be organized will be managed by the file manager, and the device manager is the one who will manage all the peripheral devices connected to your computer system. And you can see here all these 4 managers are interrelated. So it doesn't mean that processor manager need not communicate with the memory manager, or the memory manager is not communicating with the input output device manager. So it is all interlinked. Each manager will communicate with the other manager to have a smooth way of running the computer system, right? And all these are connected to the user command interface also. So this is how it is connected. So all these 5 components of an operating system are all interconnected. So you might have seen the base of the pyramid shows the 4 essential managers of the operating system for any operating system, right from your Android operating system to your server operating system, whatever operating system you are using, all the operating system will have these 4 essential managers. and each working with others to perform its task. So it doesn't mean that the memory manager is going to work all alone or in a standalone manner. It communicates, it works with others to perform its task. So these are the four essential managers. And apart from those managers, if you have network functions, that can also be made as an integral part of an operating system, because it is not an integral part of the operating system. So the network manager can be added to handle the networking task. So this can be another manager which is running on the not on the bottom layer, at the above layer. And the user command interface, as I told you, this is on the topmost of the pyramid, and the command interface will specify how users interact with the operating system by issuing the commands, right? So it is completely based on the design concept of the operating system. So it varies from one operating system to another operating system. So you might have observed, like, the user interface that you use in Windows operating system is totally different from the user interface of your Linux operating system. The user interface that you use in your mobile devices, in your Android operating system, is completely different from the embedded device operating system, right? So it varies from operating system to operating system. But the point to be noted here is, apart from these four essential managers, and if your machine needs to be connected to a network, you will be having a network manager working in your operating system. Then for all these things to be initiated, to initiate any task, you need a user command interface in your operating system. And this is where users will interact with the operating system. They will be issuing commands. So all the graphical user interface or your command line interface can be used as the user interface. So it depends on the operating system. So you might have come across your Linux operating system which has the graphical user interface, and apart from that you also work with the terminal, right? So in the terminal you have only the command line interfaces, whereas if you use graphical user interface, you will see lots of icons. By clicking the icons, you initiate some task in the operating system, right? This is a very brief abstract view of the operating system. So based on this abstract view, we are going to talk about what do you mean by process management. This process management is handled by the processor manager. So this module will be responsible for process management. We know that what is a process. We had already discussed a process is nothing but a program in execution state. Any program in execution state is what you call as a process, and it is a unit of work within the system. So you can say that program is a passive entity and process is an active entity. Okay. Now, all of you know that a program does nothing unless the instructions are executed by the CPU, right? So, a program is a passive entity. Why? Because it is not going to do anything unless the instructions are executed by the CPU. Once the CPU starts its execution of a program, the program becomes a process, thereby it becomes an active entity. Okay. Now, whenever you are going to execute a program, the program becomes a process, and this process needs certain resources, which includes the CPU, the memory, input output and files, right? I often tell you the example of preparing a document in your computer system using your word processor, right? So if you want to prepare a document, you will be using your Microsoft Office suite or maybe LibreOffice suite. In those cases, right? So in those cases, what you do, you open the application. When you initiate the application, obviously the program needs to be executed in the CPU. then this program must be loaded into the primary memory, and you need the keyboard and monitor for typing the document. So there comes the input output device. Not only that, you need to store this document in your secondary storage device as a file. So there comes the file. So just for preparing a document, you need these 4 different resources to complete the task. And not only that, for initializing any data also you need some of the resources. Okay, and once the process gets terminated, all these resources must be reclaimed. All these resources must be reclaimed. So once the process gets terminated, all these resources, because we are executing a process, we need these resources, and then the data needs to be initialized. And once the process gets terminated, or sometimes not while terminating, apart from terminating, sometimes when the process gets suspended also, right, when it is going into the waiting state, by the time also these resources will be reclaimed. And why we are reclaiming it? So that the resources can be used by another process. Now, when you have this process, you may be having a single threaded processing, or you will be having multi-threaded processing also. The single threaded process will have only one program counter specifying. You know what is a program counter is? Program counter is nothing but it gives you the address of the next instruction to be executed, right? So if it is going to be a single threaded process, then only one program counter is required, and the process executes these instructions sequentially, one at a time, until the process gets terminated. So the processor needs to focus only on this particular process, right? So there is only one process, only one threaded process is there. So this process will be executed by the processor sequentially, and if it is having some branching instructions, of course it will branch through. And this instruction will be executed one at a time. So one instruction will be taken from the process and it will be executed. So until this process gets terminated, the process will be executed. Whereas if you are going to have multi-threaded processing, right, so more than one threads of a process, then it will have more than one program counter will also be there. Because for each process, or for each thread, let me say, for each thread it needs a program counter to keep track of the address of the next instruction to be executed. So the operating system may have a single threaded process or multi-threaded process for execution. So the process manager, or let me say the processor manager, will decide which thread is to be executed at what time, for which it will keep track of the address of these processes in a program counter. If it is single threaded, then there is only one program counter. If it is multi-threaded, more than one program counter will be there. So we'll be discussing how it is going to have more than one program counter. If there is going to be only one program counter, or how it is to be done. If there is more than one processes, how it is to be done. If there is more than one thread, then how it is to be done. All these things will be discussed later in detail in the second module, processor management. Now, whenever you see a system, the system will have many processes. It is not going to have only one process. It will have more than one process running. Multitasking, multi-user, then multi-processing, time sharing. These are the different environments available. Based on that, you will have many processes running in a system. So when I say many processes, some of the processes will be the user processes, user initiated process, like you are going to open a Microsoft Word document, or you open the web browser, or you open the file browser. These are the different user processes running in your system. and some of the operating system processes. So you will have lots of daemon processes or background processes running in your operating system. Say for example, the memory management module will be one of the process running always in your machine, in your computer system. Or the device manager is one of the modules which will be running always in a computer system. So some operating system processes will also be running. Now since I have more than one user processes, more than one operating system processes, all these processes will be running concurrently on one CPU, or if your machine is having more than one CPU, it will be running concurrently on more than one CPUs, right? And the concurrency will be achieved by multiplexing on a single CPU among the processes and threads. So if you are going to have only one CPU, how the concurrency will be handled? So for which we will have lots of CPU scheduling algorithms available. Based on any of these algorithms, the process management or the processor manager will decide which process will be using the CPU at a particular time or at a time T1. So many processes, in these many processes, some will be user processes and some will be the system processes, but all these processes are currently in the execution state. That is why because the program in execution state is what you call as process. So that means this process has been initiated and it is currently executing in your computer system. But when I say executing, more than one processes are there. If so, all the processes cannot be run simultaneously by the CPU. It depends on the scheduling algorithm, right? So what kind of scheduling algorithm you have and how many CPUs are there in your computer system. Based on that, how the concurrency will be achieved is decided. And if you have single CPU, then it will be multiplexed to achieve the concurrency. Now these are some of the activities in connection with the process management. The processor manager is responsible for creating and deleting both user process and system process. Okay. So suppose say you want to watch a movie, right? But what you do, you will open your media player, you double click on the media player. So when you double click on the media player is a program which is stored in your secondary storage device. So you browse through your files and you select the media player and you double click on the media player. So when you double click on the media player, the processor manager will create a process for your media player program. That is why we say it is responsible for creating the user process and the system process. The same way, when the system processes will be created, when you boot your machine, operating system will be loaded. By the time the different modules and services of your computer system will be initialized. So all these services will be initialized. That means, what do you mean by initializing? You are going to initialize the program. When you say initializing the program will be converted into a system process. So like that, the process manager is responsible for creating user process and system processes. Not only that, it is also responsible for deleting this process also. When the process gets terminated or when the process gets suspended, right? It is in the waiting state or it is getting terminated, it has to delete both user and system processes. Okay. Then apart from that, it needs to suspend and resume the processes also. So when it needs to be suspended and when it needs to be resumed is the next question. So when the process needs to be suspended and when the process needs to be resumed. So say for example, when one process is having input output operation, let us assume. When one process is having input output operation, it will be waiting for the input output device to respond. By the time the CPU will be idle. So what the process manager will do? The process manager will be allocating another process to the processor. So by the time the current process will be suspended, right, or it will go into the waiting state. So once it has completed its input output operation, the process will be resumed. So the process manager is responsible for suspending means the process will be in a wait state, and once the process has completed its input output operation, it will be resumed. And not only that, since the computer system is going to have more than one processors, and some of these processors are interconnected processors, if so, it needs the inter-process communication and inter-process synchronization also, right? So they have to synchronize very well. Only then the program or the process will not have any conflict in requesting for the resources or in claiming the resources. So since only one resource is there, but it is to be shared by more than one process, by the time the proper inter-process communication and inter-process synchronization must be there, only then it can be handled. And whenever there are more than one processes, another very important mechanism to be provided is the deadlock handling, because more than one processes will be requesting for a resource. Say for example, it may be requesting for memory, or it may be requesting for input output device. So when these processes are requesting for one resource at the same time, and they are waiting for the completion of another process, right, completion of another process, then sometimes it happens like process A requesting for let me show you an example. Let me say we have process 1. I have process 1, then I have process 2 also. So two processes, let us assume these are the two processes currently run by the machine. So computer system, these are the two process 1 and process 2. Okay, now let us assume that process 1 is having a device. Let me say this is device 1. So it is currently allocated with this device. Okay, so this is device 1. The same way so this is device 1 and this is device 2. Okay, so currently, right, when the process 1 is executing, it is holding, right, let me say process 1 is allocated with device 1 and process 2 is allocated with device 2. So it is currently, right, process 1 is currently having device 1 holding it, and process 2 is currently holding device 2, right? But to complete the task of process 2, it needs device 1, right? So it needs device 1. So what it will do? It will be requesting for device 1. So this is requesting. Okay. In the same way, process 1. So that means what? It is going to, process 2 is holding device 2 to, before, if it wants to release device 2, it needs device 1, then it has to do some task with device 1. Only then it can release device 2. In the same way, process 1 is holding device 1, but it is requesting for device 2. This is one scenario that may happen in a computer system. So it is going to request. So what happens? This is being held by okay. So this is holding it. It needs device 2 to complete its task. Whereas process 2 is holding device 2 and it needs device 1 to complete its task. So if this kind of scenario happens, obviously this situation is what you call as deadlock, because the devices will not be released and the devices will not be released, and what happens? Let me have it as 22. Okay, so I hope it is visible to you. So this is what happens. So this process, this is a process, and this is another process which are currently run by your processor. The process 1 is holding device 1, but it is requesting for device 2 to complete its task. Whereas process 2 is holding device 2 and at the same time it is requesting for device 1. So unless otherwise any one of this process release the device, right? So either P2 must release device 2 and P1 must release device 1. Only then they can have the other device to be allocated. So this kind of situation may happen in a computer system, which you call as the deadlock handling. This is one of the very important mechanism to be introduced in the process management. So the processor manager is responsible for creating the process, deleting the process, suspending the process, resuming the process, and managing the inter-process and inter-process synchronization and inter-process communication. And apart from that, if any deadlock happens, or if any it is not just after happening the deadlock must be prevented, or deadlock must be handled, or deadlock must be detected. We'll be discussing all these things in detail in the second module, right? So these are the different activities of process management. Then the next important module of operating system is your memory management, which is done by your memory manager. You know that main memory is the repository of quickly accessible data shared by the CPU and input-output devices, right? So if the CPU wants to read some data or write some data, it will take main memory as its repository. And not only that, all the input-output devices will be reading the data from the main memory and writing the data into the main memory. So this is the only repository which is used for sharing the data, both for reading and writing, by the two important resources, CPU and input-output devices. Now the processor, right, the CPU will read the instructions from the main memory during the instruction fetch cycle. All these points you might have discussed in your computer organization course. So during the instruction fetch cycle, it will read the instruction from the main memory, and it reads and writes the data from the main memory also, right, during the data fetch cycle. So this is what you call as von Neumann architecture, storing the data in the primary memory, right? So both instructions and data will be stored in the primary memory, which you call as the von Neumann architecture. So your processor is the one which is going to read and write data into the memory, primary memory. Okay. Not only that, the main memory is generally only large storage device that the CPU is able to address and access directly. Why? Because CPU cannot write any data to the input output device, or it cannot read any data directly from the input output device. Whatever data it needs to read or write, it has to do through the main memory. So that means if you want to read something from the keyboard data will be first stored into the primary memory, only then it reaches the CPU. The same way, CPU writes the data into the primary memory, and from the primary memory it will be going to the output device. So whatever you type in the keyboard is not directly being displayed on the monitor. Whatever you type, it goes to the primary memory, and from there it will go to the output device, which is the monitor. So the CPU, for example, the CPU to process data from disk, those data must first be transferred to the main memory by CPU. CPU generated input output calls. Your storage device will also be treated as a input output operation. You know that DMA technique, all those things, data transfer techniques. So using any of the data transfer techniques, the CPU will generate an input output call for copying the data from the secondary storage device, that means from the hard disk to the main memory. So whatever data is to be processed, which is stored in the secondary storage device, must be transferred to the main memory for the CPU to perform the operation. And not only that, instructions must also be available in the primary memory for the CPU to execute them. So this is one of the very important point that we have to understand. The main memory is the only repository where the reading and writing operation is done for the CPU as well as for the input output devices. And if the CPU wants to execute a program, right? If the CPU wants to execute a program, it must be mapped to the absolute address and loaded into the primary memory. So this is the point we will be discussing in the virtual memory concept. What do you mean by absolute address? What do you mean by physical address? What do you mean by logical address? And how it is being generated, and how it is being mapped while executing a program. All those concepts we will be discussing later in the memory management techniques. But the point to be noted here is mapping the absolute address and loading it into the primary memory is done by the memory manager. And as the program executes, it accesses the program instructions and data from the memory by generating these absolute addresses. So, for different memory management techniques, the absolute address generation will be varying. So, we have a number of memory management techniques. Each technique will be generating the absolute address in a different way. So, whenever the processor wants to access the instruction or data, the processor has to first generate the absolute address, and whichever address it is generating, from that memory location, the instruction or data will be read or stored into the memory. The same way, when the program terminates, so during the execution, this mapping process will be done. So, see, when you want to execute a program, when the computer system wants to execute a program, the first thing is the program needs to be loaded into the primary memory. Okay, fine. So once it is loaded, the instructions will be executed. So by the time the CPU will be generating the absolute addresses, and it will read the instruction from the primary memory, and it will start executing the program. Fine. So once the program gets terminated, what it has to do? Obviously, the memory space has to be reclaimed. The memory space has to be reclaimed. How does it reclaim? The memory space will be declared as a free available memory, so that the next program can be loaded and executed in that particular memory location. So in that way, memory management not only does the mapping and reclaiming, the memory management determines what is in memory when optimizing the CPU utilization and computer response to users. This is very, very important. The memory management will determine what is in memory and when it is to be loaded into the primary memory. This is what you call as optimizing the CPU utilization and computer response to the users. That is, if you want to improve the utilization of the CPU and the speed of computer's response to its user, then the general purpose computers must keep more than one program in the primary memory. I think I make sense here. Utilizing, how do you utilize the CPU to its maximum utility, right? How do you optimize the CPU utilization? How we can optimize the CPU utilization? That means CPU should not be idle, or CPU time or the CPU cycles should not be wasted. So for which we have to improve the utilization of the CPU. So if you want to improve the utilization of the CPU, what you have to do? You have to keep more than one programs in the primary memory. Why? Because when one program is going for input-output operation, the other program can utilize the CPU. When one program, or let me say when one process is doing input-output operation, the other process can make use of the CPU. That is what you call as utilization of the CPU in an effective way. So if I want to utilize the CPU in an effective way, you have to have more than one programs or several programs in the primary memory. So since we are going for more programs in the primary memory to improve the utilization of the CPU, what happens? Need for the memory management arises. The need for memory management arises. So many different memory management schemes are used for this memory management techniques, and different schemes are available, and all these schemes we will be discussing in detail in the third module. Okay, so the point to be noted here is, if you want to have the improved utilization of the CPU, then the computer system must have more than one programs in the primary memory. So when it has more than one programs in the primary memory, you need memory management schemes managing the memory, right? Which partition is to be allocated to which program. So you need proper memory management scheme. We have different memory management schemes available for managing the memory in an efficient manner. So these are the activities of the memory manager. It keeps track of which part of the memory are currently being used and by whom. That means which part of the primary memory is currently used by which process, and how long it is going to use that particular memory. All these things will be kept track. Keeping track of which part of the primary memory is currently being used and who is using that particular part of the memory. And not only that, deciding which processes and data to move into and out of the memory, right? So say for example, let us come to this and let me have the memory here. Okay, so inside the memory you will have the operating system stored. So one part will be stored for the operating system always, right? So operating system will have one part of the memory. Let us increase the width, okay, so that it will be more clear for you. So I'll change the color. Okay, so always the first part of the memory will be allocated to operating system. Okay, so what it says, it has to keep track of which part of the memory are currently being used and by whom. So what it will do, it will allocate. So user process 1 will be here, user process 1. Okay, then you will have user process 2 allocated here. Okay, so this is how the memory will be allocated. So what the memory manager has to do, okay, it has to understand, like, right from this address to this address, right? From this address to this address, it is the space allocated for the primary, it is the space allocated for the operating system. Then right from this point to this point, it is allocated for process 1. The same way, from this point to so what the memory manager has to do now, from, let me call this as, let me call it as A, let me call it as B, let us call it as C, call it as D. So what happens now? Right from address A to address B is the location allocated for the operating system. Right from the location B to location C, it is allocated for user process 1, and right from C to D, it is allocated for user process 2. So this information will be kept track by the memory manager. Okay, now this another activity it has to do is deciding which process and data to move into and out of the memory. So what it will be doing, once the user process 1 gets terminated, it has to be moved out of the memory. And suppose if user process 3 is requesting for memory, then what it has to do, right from location D, it has to allocate for user process 3. User process 3 is requesting for the memory now. 3 is requesting for the memory. So it has to allocate this particular space. By the time if user process 1 has got terminated, it will be deleted from the primary memory. This area becomes a free area in the primary memory. So the memory manager will keep track of which part of the memory is used by whom, and not only that, this is the one which will decide when it has to be loaded into the primary memory and when it has to be removed or deleted from the primary memory. So that will also be decided, and based on this decision policy, it will allocate the memory space and deallocate the memory space as and when required. So these are the different activities of the memory manager, and how these activities are done. These activities are done based on memory management scheme or the memory management algorithm that we design in our operating system. Okay, and the next one is your storage management. Let us discuss storage management in our next session. Thank you.